In just over 3 months, Cyberpunk 2077 is about to change forever, and even change a bit further if you have $30 to spend also. Just last week, numerous media outlets and content creators were able to finally go hands-on with Phantom Liberty and patch 1.7, and via some of the details to come out around this, it's been basically confirmed that we are getting Cyberpunk 2077 2.0. In this video, I went through and collected basically every major change that is coming to the game, and I'm trying to lay them out to you in a nice cohesive list. And I was fortunate enough to actually play the new update myself at one of these hands-on sessions, so I can definitely fill in with some of my own observations. And even if you have been following some of the interviews or preview videos, you may have missed some things, like some of the weird release date trickiness with patch 1.7, as we do kind of have a release window for that now, but also just some outright surprise features that even I didn't notice after going hands-on with the update and expansion. But this also seems like a great time to shout out today's video sponsor, Displate. Displate's going to offer some incredibly high-quality metal posters and a marketplace with millions of designs, so you'll certainly find something for you, such as the Cyberpunk Lumino. This is a really cool metal print that actually has built-in OLED, so you can get this super unique look on your wall. But you don't want to wait with this one, as the Cyberpunk 2077 Lumino is going to only be available for 9 more days. But after that, it's gone. And Displate has a ton of other super high detailed Cyberpunk posters, some of which just being based around the original game and some others around edge runners. And if you use my affiliate link in the video description, you may even be able to get a bit of a discount. But looking back at Cyberpunk and Phantom Liberty and patch 1.7, one of the difficult parts when looking at all of this is we don't exactly know what is going to be a part of Phantom Liberty and paid content compared to what features are just going to be a part of patch 1.7 and free content. And one of the pretty interesting parts about this is, based off a recent interview, it seems like CDPR themselves may not even be entirely sure what's going to be part of the expansion versus just the update. But one thing we do know is that you can continue on an existing save game. Phantom Liberty will not require a new save to begin, and one of the exclusive features of Phantom Liberty is going to be the totally new district, that with Dogtown. This is a full and proper 6th district, including 3 sub-districts within it, and it's all going to be controlled by Kurt Hansen. Dogtown was originally known as the Combat Zone, but when Kurt Hansen took over, things were renamed. And it really seems like Kurt Hansen is going to be the big bad guy of the expansion storyline overall. Dogtown's described as being based off of South American drug lords who feign caring for the community as a cover-up for the illicit activities they conduct. And as you explore through Dogtown, you're going to find it infested with these Baggress soldiers, these being an even more militarized group in the area, and of course led by Kurt Hansen himself. And they do really lead the area. They'll be patrolling around, guarding certain checkpoints, but also if you get a wanted level in Dogtown, it's going to be Baggress soldiers that come in response, not the NCPD. And Dogtown overall is going to be laid out a bit different compared to the rest of Night City. There's going to be a much larger focus on interiors here. You're going to be entering far more interior locations, and it seems like a lot of the action, a lot of the major story moments will happen in interiors. So though Dogtown's overall footprint on the map may not be as extensive as certain other districts, it seems like it'll almost certainly make up for that with its density and interior locations. One of the biggest questions I got after posting my own hands-on impressions of Phantom Liberty was how going in and out of this area will work. And it seems like largely once you actually get into Dogtown and get situated here, you will be able to enter and exit it freely, but in order to gain access for the first time, you will have to get through a certain amount of the story and actually begin the expansion. Apparently you have to get through the quest with the Voodoo Boys and Placide, but after you do this mission, the Phantom Liberty content will open up. And then when you actually gain access to Dogtown, it seems like the initial story beats of the Phantom Liberty content will kind of lock you in this area as you are trying to rescue the president, but after being locked in for a couple of quests in Dogtown, things will open up more properly and you're able to come and go freely. And CDPR has even described how with creating a new game, it seems like there will be a way to skip to the expansion content, similar to what CDPR did with some of the Witcher 3 expansions where you can kind of just get to the new content immediately. But of course, Dogtown's only going to be explorable if you purchase Phantom Liberty. One of the unique aspects about Dogtown, at least from a gameplay perspective, is it's going to feature a free area with a black market. We can see the black market in the Xbox Game Showcase Extended. This is actually the scene I saw right as I began my hands-on with Phantom Liberty. I probably spent a good 5 minutes just exploring this area due to how detailed and pretty it is. It really seems like with Dogtown, CDPR benefited from dropping those last-gen consoles and were really able to upgrade some of these environments. CDPR themselves describe how they put a lot of work to make things feel way more alive with Phantom Liberty and in some of these new areas. And this black market will actually sell new things that'll only be available here because, you know, they're less than legal in some of the other districts of Night City. One thing being mentioned for sale in the black market are overclocked weapons. Basically, as you fire these, it'll severely impact your stamina, but they have other unique benefits and strengths. We have heard how Phantom Liberty and patch 1.7 are going to have tons of new items. New weapons have been shown off in the released gameplay, and even beyond that, just during my own hands-on, I saw several new weapons that aren't even in this gameplay. But it doesn't stop there. We're also getting new clothing, new cyberware, new mods like scopes, and even just stat-altering mods for both weapons and clothing, as well as even totally new vehicles are coming. Some of this is already revealed. We can see some of the reworked cars from the trailer, but also a new Quadra Vigilante. There's going to be a new pre-order bonus for Phantom Liberty. And on a higher level, when it comes to some of the loot, there's going to be a completely new tier system implemented. Nearly all items are now going to have a tier associated to them, and the loot drop system was reworked. It's not entirely clear what this means or how exactly things were changed, but even from my own hands-on, I noticed that on many of the weapons, clothing items, and mods for those things, they now have a new tier listing, whether it be tier 1, 2, 3, or 4. One aspect we did see mention is how apparently they reworked looting of weapons, so as you pick up weapons off the ground, they will typically be a bit more interesting and powerful than the weapon you're already using. As well as nearly every weapon vendor is now going to have some kind of unique weapon offering, so it'll actually make them stand out. From some of the other hands-on sessions out there, we've heard about how there's going to be reworks to the armor and cosmetic system. Reportedly, armor is going to largely be disconnected from clothing now, and instead it's going to be mostly tied to your cyberware. So having good defensive stats is going to be largely based off which cyberware you choose to implant on your body now instead of which clothing you're wearing. So you could pretty freely choose what to wear and how you want your character to look. Although reportedly, there are going to be literal armors that will give you some defensive bonuses. Like if you put on a ballistic vest, yes, that will provide some armor, but the vast majority of other clothing won't. But one of the big things coming with patch 1.7 is cyberware as a whole received a rework. On one hand, there's going to be totally new animations for installing cyberware, so you're going to get this from the first-person perspective. As you go to a Ripper Doc, you're going to sit in the chair and see them actually do things to you for most of the cyberware in the game. But there's also going to be some limits placed on how much cyberware you can actually use at a given time. Basically now, there's going to be a lot more utility to your cyberware. Of course, we just heard about some of the armor, but also many of the weapons have become more powerful on the cyberware side. So now you're going to have a new cyberware capacity. The more cyberware you equip, the closer you'll get to capacity, this almost being a system similar to cyberpsychosis, but it seems as you actually hit this capacity limit, you're going to simply lose some of your overall HP, and there's no actual cyberpsychosis functionality implemented with this update. And it seems like there's going to be some perks and skills to help you out with this, like the engineer perk being reworked to help expand and extend your capacity for cyberware. As of right now, the only thing we've heard about as far as a downside is your overall health will go down a bit, but it seems like there definitely could be other debuffs depending on which type of cyberware you have and how much of the capacity you've used. And engineering isn't the only skill or attribute that'll hook into this. There's also things like cool apparently extending how long optical camo will last in game. The police system has been one of the most notable reworks of patch 1.7, and I got to experience this somewhat from my own hands-on. Now when committing a crime, the police or the defense force in that area, like when I was in Dogtown, the Bagres soldiers were the ones who showed up when I got wanted instead of the NCPD, but commit a crime and you're going to have the police show up on vehicles searching for you. No more of that random robot drone floating around, but instead now you'll have a proper cop on a bike investigating what happened. And to be clear, all this background footage you're seeing around the police rework or even vehicle combat is mod footage. As of right now, we've only actually gotten one clip of vehicle combat in action, so I'm just showing you some of the mods, but honestly, after my hands-on, the mod system was incredibly similar to the official system coming with patch 1.7. And reportedly, the AI will actually vary depending on where you are. So in some areas, this will be a very casual investigation compared to in some of the richer areas where the police will look for you far more intently even if you only have 1 star. And if you engage, you'll get more stars and larger responses. The higher the wanted level, the more serious the pursuit by police will be, and apparently at the max wanted level, max tac will deploy, and it has been described how this is a real max tac deployment from a dropship. But also reportedly, if we become notorious enough, there's going to be many bosses in Night City that will attack us. But that isn't all, as if you do drive away, those police will now chase you as they're always spawning in cars. Cyberpunk 2077 will now have full and proper police chases. And on one hand, yeah, there's just that really fun sandbox aspect of you driving away as tons of different vehicles chase you in the background. There's a couple of other pretty cool mechanics around this. Apparently the NCPD can actually set up roadblocks and barricades to try and get you to stop if you have a high enough wanted level. And in general, the police AI seems to be overhauled, so sometimes you may notice them using one car to block you and another car to try and ram you. And if max tac does eventually show up, they can apparently hack your car. But as a counterbalance, we're going to have some options to listen to the police radio and figure out what's going to be happening next. But one of the pretty fun parts nuts about this is apparently it's not only going to be happening to us, as there will also be other dynamic police chases between gangs and the NCPD, or even just gang-on-gang combat. Now, as you're exploring through Night City, it seems like there were several overhauls to the open world aspect, so there'll be a lot more happening around you, including police chasing other people. To go along with this, we are also getting vehicle combat. You can fire from your car at other enemies, but also those enemies can fire back at you from their car. CDPR describes how you're also able to use some melee weapons on motorcycles, such as a katana on a bike, which just sounds epic, but your car can also have built-in weapons. In my play session, I hopped into a higher-end car and had 2 machine guns pop out of the front, James Bond style. I could use those machine guns to take out all the enemies around me as I was driving around, and I could even switch to other weapons to fire rockets from my car. And even vehicles got some upgrades and extensions with this, as now vehicles are going to have specific weak spots that you can target, like a car's charging port. And even mechanics like shooting out a vehicle's tires to slow it down have reportedly been added with the update. It seems like some of these new features will actually be unlocked via a fixer in Dogtown, so not every vehicle is going to have weapons, but you're able to unlock weapons for some vehicles thanks to this fixer. But of course, if a vehicle doesn't have built-in weapons, you can always just use your regular weapons that you have on your character, like traditional vehicle combat. There's also going to be totally new options to steal vehicles. It seems like there's going to be specific gigs or activities around this, but also a new website to buy vehicles. It seems like this will be pretty similar to how you buy an apartment, and it's going to replace the old text messaging system that we had previously. Some of these vehicle steal missions are going to be done for Mama Wells, and sometimes you need to complete the mission with no damage done to the vehicle so you can actually get it for yourself. So it seems like it's going to be very carefully driving that vehicle and hoping nothing bad happens to it, which I'm sure will be rage-inducing. But there's also other versions of these missions, like following a car close enough to hack it. And it seems like this is going to apply to many of the cars that we previously couldn't unlock. These activities are described as infinitely repeatable, so it seems like eventually you can basically unlock every car in Cyberpunk 2077 for your own garage, or at least many of them for your own garage. But there's also going to be general improvements to combat and even the AI in the game. The AI is described as getting an overhaul with this update, doing things like using cover more, actually blocking and countering in melee fights. Enemies will now use a wider array of quick hacks against you, as well as enemies' health and armor has been reworked so much, it's not entirely clear how this new system will function, but you can see segmented health bars above enemies now, as well as there could be a greater emphasis on focusing on enemies' weak spots depending on which skills or perks you have unlocked. But also just some simpler mechanic changes on our own side. Dodging is going to have its own dedicated button now, so it's going to be far more functional, as well as your active cyberware has a direct use key and it will pop up right on your HUD. No more having to fight between grenades and using your cyberware. Healing was reworked to have a cooldown now. You can no longer spam healing items freely. It seems like 2 of the major changes here are, 1, after using a healing item a couple of times, it'll go on cooldown, and secondly, if you're actively being attacked by an enemy, you can no longer use a healing item. Honestly, I wasn't able to play with this too much during my hands-on session. I only briefly noticed that I wasn't able to heal when I typically could in the older builds of the game, but it definitely seems like it could be one of the biggest balance changes overall. No more spam healing, as an easy get-out-of-jail-free card at any point in the game is a pretty big change. Although on a higher level, CDPR has confirmed that the difficulty curve in Cyberpunk has been overhauled overall. So as you jump into patch 1.7, you should probably notice just some general balance changes that we're likely unable to recognize with such a brief preview. But Phantom Liberty will be different in its story elements as well. Based on my experience, it felt like the DLC was laid out in an interesting way where you don't really know who you can trust. And it felt like you're going to basically have different options on who you could become buddy-buddy with as far as the major characters of the DLC go. The first major player here is Songbird. This is the netrunner who initially recruits us to help out the president, and as we hear in the trailer, they claim to have a solution for our relic problem. It seems like right at the start of the expansion, Songbird's going to basically override Johnny Silverhand for our bit and be in our head. But in addition to that, she's also a very real person we're able to go up to and meet and interact with. Rosalind Myers is the president of the new United States of America, but also former military. She's definitely able to handle herself, and we're going to spend a segment of this expansion buddying up with her, being on the run with Rosalind Myers. But from my own hands-on experience, where we had a pretty in-depth one-on-one with this character, you can definitely tell you're not sure if you can trust her. Johnny Silverhand's going to come back to provide his own commentary on events from the comfort of your brain, and reportedly reportedly, according to some of the recent interviews, there's almost as much Johnny Silverhand in Phantom Liberty as there was in the base game, so we should be hearing from him quite often. And of course, there's Solomon Reed, played by Idris Elba. He stole the show for me early on. He's going to pop up several hours into the expansion. He's basically going to be a secret agent aiming to help out the president. As well as we know that at least one more content creator is being added to the game. The Sphere Hunter is a YouTuber who's going to be playing a character named Stella in Phantom Liberty, and the same person actually shared a bunch of details that I've been highlighting throughout this video on Twitter. So it almost seems like Phantom Liberty is going to be laid out where there's going to be this web of characters focused on a common goal. That with helping the president. Right from the start, we could see the president's space plane get shot down, and we're all trying to rescue/help her. But each of the major characters also has their own motive or techniques, and some of these characters don't even trust each other despite largely being on the same team. For example, it seems like Solomon Reed definitely isn't a fan of Songbird based on my own hands-on, and even Johnny Silverhand gives you a lot of commentary on the president herself about how Johnny Silverhand isn't her biggest fan. So it seems like as you go throughout this, you're going to have a lot of little birds in your ear telling you who you can or can't trust. But making those decisions on who you can trust yourself is going to be a major theme of the expansion overall, and reportedly our decisions will impact the fate of some of the characters around us. This expansion has been described as a spy thriller, and this is going to apply to some of the gameplay sequences as well. There'll be things like noir sequences, as well as familiar spy tropes that we're going to get to live out. At points, you'll feel like James Bond. We hear crazy gadgets being described, and this face-changing tech will come into play. As well as in some of the interviews, they even mentioned some Bond-esque weapons coming in Phantom Liberty, but that isn't the only method of play we've heard, as they've also described being like Jason Bourne. You're one person against the agency with these big action sequences happening around you and you being involved in, or even just joining the agency overall and being one of the agents in the overall ladder, not really being sure which of your comrades you can trust and trying to navigate around other spies. And speaking of, Phantom Liberty will have different endings, including impacts on the outcomes of the story in the main game. As with the Phantom Liberty expansion, there's going to be one new ending for Cyberpunk 2077 overall, tied to one of the characters in Phantom Liberty, or perhaps several of them. But it's not just the main story of Phantom Liberty, there's also going to be a fair amount of side content as well. It's described how broadly there will be more open world interactivity, and specifically we hear how in Dogtown, weapon trade is still a big thing, so there's going to be weapon deals or even weapon airdrops going on, and we're going to have the ability to interfere with some of those things if we want to. It isn't really clear if this is going to be a full-on random gig or literally just a thing that could pop up in the open world, and if you see it and go there, you can get involved. But it's described how overall there's going to be more gang conflict, and specifically in Dogtown, a ruling militia with dynamic encounters that we'll run into. And CDPR has described how Phantom Liberty is going to include a wealth of side content beyond just the main story. One of the biggest overhauls coming with both patch 1.7 and as a part of Phantom Liberty is the skills system getting a near comprehensive rework. For starters, it seems like many of the naturally progressing skill unlocks may be gone now, at least based off this image where that little bar that's typically in the bottom corner is just gone. But also perks have just gotten a comprehensive overhaul and rework. In vanilla Cyberpunk 2077, many of the perks you can unlock were percentage-based stat buffs. Things like you deal more damage with a rifle, or you deal twice as much damage with a rifle from behind cover. But it has been confirmed that with Phantom Liberty, CDPR wanted to get away from that, and now many of the unlockables are genuinely new abilities for your character. So with some simple examples, it seems like mid-air dashing, katanas reflecting bullets, and even melee finishers are all skill or perk unlocks in the reflexes tree now. There's also things like the ability to run through enemies overall or pick them up and throw them, which will be under the body attribute now. So there's a heavy focus on the perks you unlock actually giving you a new ability or new functionality. But there's also just a new perk layout. This has not been shared in the official gameplay, but one of these images was posted on social media following some of the hands-on sessions, and you can see the skill tree is now an actual skill tree and looks completely different. Right off the bat, you'll see that attributes are no longer broken up into several trees, but instead, under reflexes, we have one big tree encompassing assault, handguns, and blades, or at least that's probably what these three are. On one hand, there's going to be far less perks. It seems like there is definitely a perk consolidation, but as we mentioned earlier, hopefully the perks are a bit more impactful now. As well as this tree is broken down into Rookie, Pro, Phenom, and Legend. And it basically looks like that you're going to need to spend a certain number of perk points in the Rookie tier to unlock the Pro tier. And from this specific picture, you can see we've spent 16 perk points on this tree, but we need need to spend 20 to unlock to the legend tier, or at least that's my interpretation of it. You can also see the perks having an interconnected flow. The big icons are likely the new abilities, with the little branches being stat-based changes either to those abilities or perhaps your character stats overall. It also looks like you'll need to unlock the prerequisite perks in a path to basically open up that path. Like here, we must take this perk in order to unlock the opportunity to select this one. As well as one final thing I noticed during my hands-on is perks are now individually refundable. So I was able to select any of the perks individually and just refund that singular perk point freely and then spend it on something else. So it seems like a lot of this rework was to give you far more flexibility and options as far as your build path goes, and that includes actually switching things up midway through the game. Although that actually isn't the only changes coming to skills and perks, as there's also going to be a completely new 6th relic tree. This is going to be a feature of the Phantom Liberty expansion, so not in the free update, and the 6th relic tree is different, having less unlockables overall, so less options for things to unlock, but the unlocks you have on the relic tree are going to be more powerful. These new relic perks are going to be unlocked with special relic points, and these reportedly get introduced to us by Songbird during Phantom Liberty, but the way you actually unlock more of these points is described as being via exploration in Dogtown. CDPR says they wanted to give players more to do in the sandbox, and this mechanic is meant to reward that sandbox exploration with powerful new abilities via the relic tree. This new relic tree will offer a spread of new abilities that can be tailored to different playstyles, from stealth-focused builds to crit-heavy gunslinger, cyberware masters, and more. It's all about maximizing your playstyle, experimenting with different builds, and finding new ways to play. And for my hands-on, I noticed several of these seem to be cyberware-focused buffs. Things have been described like seeing enemies through walls and even being able to shoot a barrage of rockets from the in-arm launcher. So it seems like the relic perks will be very powerful and really drive your build in one direction or another. One of the other changes that really makes things feel fresh is the UI and even parts of the HUD have been overhauled. You're going to see far more detailed stats for items, but also just some of the aesthetic changes. It seems like some parts of your HUD may be hidden a bit more often now, so your HUD might be more dynamic depending on what's happening in gameplay. As you're wandering around sometimes, some aspects of your HUD will just automatically turn off if you're not really using them, as well as the minimap seems to cover a bit of a wider area. Although one thing that is explicitly confirmed to not be a new feature is extensive romance options. As we heard from CDPR on Twitter, new romance options is not going to be a major thing expanded in the expansion. But through some of these interviews and hands-on, we've also heard a bit about some of the changes that have happened to CDPR in general. Phantom Liberty is going to be led by Gabe A, whose last name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. This is actually the same person to lead development of patch 1.5. Reportedly, when it came to the development of Phantom Liberty at CDPR, they got the carte blanche to make it right, including all of the time and resources that were requested. The lead on Phantom Liberty describes how he was struck by the board's humility and willingness to change, including new policies to prevent crunch and burnout from happening again. And it seems like a lot of this is legit, with even some lower level staff being asked about this and backing up that positive change has definitely occurred at CDPR. And the project lead on Phantom Liberty is also the person tapped to direct the Cyberpunk 2077 sequel. So if you love what you get with Phantom Liberty, you should get excited for the future, because this same person is going to be directing the sequel. One of the other big discussion points on Phantom Liberty and patch 1.7 in general is the updated system requirements. With this expansion, support for last-gen consoles was dropped, but more importantly, we're seeing an upgrade to the system requirements for Cyberpunk 2077 on PC, both with and without Phantom Liberty. So just due to the free update to the game, Cyberpunk's going to become harder to run, and for some people, you're going to no longer be at the minimum system requirements. The PC specs are pretty taxing, recommending an SSD and 12 gigabytes of RAM even for the lowest settings. But if you want to play the game on Ultra at 4K, you're going to need a Ryzen 7 7900X. That's even without having ray tracing turned on, and it's recommended you play on an NVMe drive. So this is kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, I could definitely get the frustration. You could have bought Cyberpunk 2077 in 2020, played it fine for the past couple of years, but now you're basically going to enter into a point where you may no longer meet the minimum system requirements. Your product is getting an update and may no longer really be playable for you. And even for me, I guess I have to upgrade my processor because I have a 5900X, which now falls outside of the recommended system requirements. And I kind of view this as a mixed bag. On one hand, it is incredibly rare for a game update 3 years after release place to change the system requirements so drastically. But at the same time, this does reflect that Cyberpunk 2077 is getting a pretty major overhaul with this free update. Like, on one hand, you could look at it as a negative in the sense that you might be barred from playing until you upgrade, but at the same time, you're also getting a huge upgrade to your game for free because you already bought it. So depending on your perspective, this could either be viewed as a huge win or very frustrating, but either way, we'll probably know more real details once Phantom Liberty actually comes out and we get some benchmarks testing some of these different builds and hardware combinations. And one of the other pretty interesting aspects of all this is it gives us an insight as to the release date of patch 1.7. It seems like it has been confirmed once again that patch 1.7 is technically releasing before Phantom Liberty, but it still seems like it's not coming anytime soon. As more or less, my deduction here is that CDPR has a legal requirement to give us 90 days notice on updates that change the system requirements. So since patch 1.7 will change the system requirements, and for some people that means that they're no longer going to be able to meet the minimum system requirements, by law, CDPR needs to give us a 90-day heads up. We got the new system requirements on June 11th, which means that patch 1.7 could come out at earliest on September 11th, which is only 9 days before Phantom Liberty anyway. So if the two are not shipping in one, they're going to be shipping really close to one another. That's at least my interpretation about this 90-day window. It's definitely been a bit of a discussion point in the community as of late, and CDPR has officially announced this on their updated system requirements post on Steam, so it's not like this is just from fan digging or speculation. And overall, yeah, it really looks like we're finally getting Cyberpunk 2077 2.0. But since you are going to be waiting a bit until you can play Phantom Liberty, check out this video where I show you one of the coolest Cyberpunk 2077 mods that I have ever experienced.